Welcome to the TRXL podcast. I'm Evan TRXL, and in this episode, I welcome Rachel Riopel. Rachel is an enterprise transformation executive working across the AECO industry to help complex organizations modernize how they deliver work at scale. She trained as an architect at North Dakota State University, cut her teeth on large educational projects, and got hooked early when Revit showed up and nobody quite knew what to do with it. That experience shaped everything. She became the person firms called when they needed someone who could see the practice and the technology at the same time, and she never fully went back to project work until she did. Over the past 2 decades, she's led transformation initiatives inside large firms, worked with owner organizations through the National Institute of Building Sciences, and now operates at the intersection of business performance, organizational design, and digital adoption. In this episode, we explore what enterprise transformation actually means when the word gets stripped of the hype. We talk about why technology initiatives stall out at the technology layer and never reach the broader organization, how the 3 C's, cache, clarity, and capability, determine whether transformation has any chance of taking hold, and why fixating on productivity and speed as the primary measure of AI's value may be pointing firms in exactly the wrong direction. What really stands out to me in this conversation is our discussion of the gap between doing a pilot and actually changing an organization. Rachel frames transformation as a design problem, not a technology problem. And that's a very similar approach to my strategy in my previous role running digital practice at HMC Architects. We've both watched firms check the boxes, declare victory, and then wonder why nothing really changed. Her argument is that technology can only carry an organization so far, and the rest of the distance has to be covered by organizational structure, shared vision, and honest self-assessment. With 70 to 80% of transformation initiatives still failing, and that number may be climbing, the firms that figure this out are going to look very different from the ones that don't. That gap is what this episode is really about. As usual, there's an extensive amount of additional information in the show notes, so be sure to check them out. Of course, you can find those directly in your podcast app if you're a paid supporter of TRXL Plus, just one of the perks. And if you're a free member, you can find them over at the website, which is trxl.co. So without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Rachel Riopel.
I love preparing for this conversation with you. I was looking at a couple of different things, and there's so many things out there right now, articles about what's happening and not just the AEC, but just in general, because the shift in our world globally and technology-wise is just tremendous. But there's little clips about different parts of one yesterday, the Atlantic, I think it was yesterday, talking about, are we horses or are we coal? Have you read that one?
No.
It was talking about sort of the transformation of the farming industry, from having 2.7 some million horses in operation in service of farming. And then how that translated to many years later as mechanization was introduced and all of the technology was introduced to farming, that it went down to 700,000, horses involved in farming. And then they started to measure trucks and tractors and things like that.
Right.
So metrics on that. And then it was compared to coal. Would we be horses in this equation, or would we be coal? And coal was something that was the revolution of the steam engine and all of those things that really, as it was a finite resource, and people had to really quickly figure out how to be efficient with it and how to make it as useful as possible in smaller and smaller amounts, because they only had so much of it. But then they realized once they did that, then the demand for it went up because it was so easy to create energy and to do all of the things with coal. Everything became easier. And so they needed more demand, right?
Forgot about the finite resource part of it, right?
We did.
It's like,
yep. We're
let's
resourceful.
use the heck out of this while it's here, right?
Humans are resourceful.
We'll figure that problem out later.
Kick the can.
Yeah.
You just kick the can. So the question in that article was ultimately, are we horses or are we coal? And
what do you think? What do you
my posit on that? I believe that we are resilient and that we are resourceful and that we will make things happen for better or worse. So I
So it
think
sounds
that
like a
we are,
third category. We're not horses or coal.
I don't, I think we're probably more like the coal scenario, right? That we are seeing diminished sort of resources, but productivity and speed and things coming along that are wonderful. But we also have to do that carefully because it still is a limited resource. So we have to keep thinking out ahead of that and
Yeah.
figuring out how to solve that problem. I don't mean to kick the can, but I think just eyes up a little bit, eyes up and further out. Some have to be focusing on that, and that's actually what I'm looking at more so than technology. We talked transformation recently, right? About what is transformation, and I think many of the folks in the industry, many fixate or focus on pilots. You've got pilots, and you've got all of these examples of how it could be amazing or how it could be. But how do you translate a pilot into something that's meaningful and not only adopted, but truly integrated into a business performance
Mm.
or process, right? Like that's
Yeah.
that's the next step.
I would love to talk about kind of the gap between exploration and operationalizing or implementation, right? Because like adoption and implementation just seem like blips. Operationalized to me is on another level of throughout the organization, right? It's something that is not just pet projects. It seems like now the potential for personal projects and productivity hacks and AI tools all being like accessible through the browser and stuff like that just means like it just gives people these opportunities to go off and explore and explore and explore and explore. And all of a sudden you've got thousands of, if, depending on the size of the firm,
Mm-hmm.
these little things that are all running independently, and there's nothing kind of operationalizing all that and crossing even the boundaries of an architectural team to an HR team to a marketing team to a graphics team to a data team it's like, okay, these are my tools. It just reminds me of the days when content lived in my folder on my desktop, stuff that I used on my
Mm-hmm.
projects, and then you had your folder too, right? And it was like, yeah, it showed up in projects, but it was like my single source of truth, which is, you know, a difficult thing to put a nail in these days.
Yeah.
It was mine. It was personal, and
Yeah.
I feel like we're still there. We're still totally there in
I
a
would
different
agree.
way.
I would agree with you. I mean, that's a human thing, I think, that it's hard to sort of extract that from people. Like, this is mine, this is how I do
Hmm.
it, and this is what works. The challenge is to figure out how to take those pilots or those explorations and bring them across an organization. And I think the one step further that I am certainly intrigued by and seeing differences in is how that relates to a business strategy and
Yeah.
how that truly integrates, because you can take things from a pilot and say, great, now I have a transformation initiative, right? And it's more of a technology initiative at that rate, right?
Yeah.
You're going to say, okay, let's CTO, CIO, let's do a technology innovation something or other. And then it can get isolated there if it's not done in full view and in full partnership with the other aspects of the operations and of really, I mean, the windows into finance and operations and technology and overall sort of goals for a firm and an organization. Really, it's a design challenge at that level, and it's something that I think often gets stuck at the technology layer and
Yeah.
stays there, and still can be powerful still, but it can be more powerful if you really understand how it integrates and supports a broader model for the company. And I think it's going to be even more important as we started talking about AI and transforming industry, not just
Mm.
AEC industry, but all industries. And all business is impacted by this. So it's not isolated to a technology space or technology lens as it may have been 20, 30 years ago, even 10, 15 years ago. And now it's much more about how do we mobilize our business? How do we enhance our client engagement, our quality delivery, our financial health of an organization? These are all technology-enabled sort of practices that are not isolated to something sparkly and shiny and fun. Or even, and I don't mean to leave it at fun and shiny, but those real practical, this is my stuff, this is the tools that I use to do my job well. Those are real things. They don't want to demean that, but when they're done in isolation, they become less value across the organization, and they need to be brought out and shared with others. So,
yeah, there's this. I think that the topic of, okay, is it culture first or technology first, or is it technology first, culture first? And I think leadership and culture kind of fit together there. But it really is a flywheel, right? It's like this, the idea is that they both have to inform each other constantly. It's not just like, okay, we'll just circle back, to use corporate speak, on this once a year and kind of redefine our roadmap, right? It's like there are technology initiatives because new technology just came on the scene and the technologists know about it. And they're trying to figure out how it could apply to the business. And then there's like the business and the operations and the culture side of things, which is like, we enable our people to do innovative things. Here's our values. Here's our vision. Let's find technology that supports us achieving those things. And those have to inform each other. Like, it's not just a one-way street. You know, one firm could look at it as a one-way street from the technology side, and another firm could look at it as a one-way street from the culture side. But I think it's becoming very clear that because of the pace at which this is happening, and because of, like, everybody can't have a view of all of it at once. It's just too much. And so we really have to be constantly checking in with each other and saying, okay, here, part of it is, let's stay within the guardrails of what our vision and what our values are. And part of it is, and yeah, we're looking for new ways to deliver or enhance or whatever those things are. And then there's also the people who are just heads down going in every day, and they're checking out that stuff, and they're like, hey, did you see this? And that just really has to be an open conversation all the time, and constantly evaluating, reevaluating, however you want to state that.
So it reminds me of design process, right? There's, you're looking at an overall design. There's no
It's not linear.
Right.
It's not like
it's
we start design, we deliver the project. It's like, and
buckle up, right. Everybody. But the process in and of itself needs to be aware that you've got people that know certain things, and you got to make sure that information, that knowledge is pulled in to inform a broader decision, and that nothing is sort of left in isolation. Otherwise, you're going to miss out. And so I think that becomes the design challenge: is how do you look at an organization, assess its resources, existing resources, and decide whether you need more resources. I think there's 3 areas. So for me, I was looking at the 4 C's, but it's the 3 C's. So I say resources, it's cash. Resources, to execute something, you need to have clarity of vision. And it's not just one person having clarity of vision, it's that vision being shared by all of those that are in this process. And that's from top to bottom. Everybody sort of has to have a very clear understanding of what we're trying to do. And then you have to have the capability, to be honest. And I think that's the one that organizations, you either have it on board, you buy it, you assemble it, you develop it. But the capability is one that I think can easily be overlooked, because we can go in, if we have enough resources, we can go buy something, a tool, and we can have a cool vision, right? And everybody's rah, let's go vision. But if you don't have the capability to do that, and there are faster ways to gain the capability and slower ways, and the faster ways, if done correctly, can enrich an organization, right? Bringing something in and helping enrich the team and the work that's being done. The slower ways tend to be your growing capability within the team. They start to explore and they learn in this sort of a grassroots kind of model. But those three things atop an organization and a structure that makes it possible for transformation to happen. And I say structure, meaning you've got all of the seats at the table looking at their shared vision and everybody sort of nodding in the same direction, right? Yes, we get it. We get that clarity. And then they're observing the business behaviors and they're supporting resources as are appropriate. So
that vision, so like the job of communicating something in an organization is just like, it's got to be on repeat all the time. Say it until you're tired of saying it and say it some more, right? And because it's like, it's so easy to lose sight of because there's so many distractions. There's so much, the landscape of what it takes to kind of operate in a firm today seems to me like, oh, there's a lot going on. Okay, let's rein it back in. Let's remember, why are we doing this? And that just has to be this constant thing. And that thing can be evolving, but it doesn't evolve at the speed of everything coming at you. But it also, it seems to me like in many firms, it doesn't evolve. It's like there's many organizations out there where it's like, this is who we are. This is who we've been. This is who we're going to continue to be. And there's not that kind of internal process of, like you stated it, like this is a design problem. And it's like projects after they're done, they're done. There's kind of that mentality too in architecture, right? And so we did that project.
Right, we're done.
And now let's focus on the work, right? Which is because a lot of times that it gets confusing, right? The incentives are to serve the client on this project, and this project is what my job is. But what you're talking about is like, this is why we exist as a business entity. And what you do supports why we exist, you as the employee of this company. And there's often a break there. Is like, do you actually know what your role is and how it supports the organization? No, I have a client that I have to serve, right? It's like that.
And that's that friction that happens because, like I said, that shared vision and that shared understanding, it is a business. There is profit to be made. There's relationships to maintain. There's all these other factors, but it all needs to serve continuation of that and sustainability of that going forward. So if we treat projects in isolation, we are not necessarily looking at long-term engagement with that client or long-term engagement with that community or that, that entity. So it's a little shift, but it's also messaging at the right levels and the messaging that makes sense for the context. Like I said, there's so many different things going on, pressures, and to get a job done, to meet a deadline, to do all of these things sort of at the ground level on projects, that it can easily sort of cut you off from a centralized, bigger message, bigger plan. But like I said, that messaging has to make sense at every level of the organization. Yeah. So simplicity in terms of vision, and then relating that to everyone in their particular roles is really important. And having advocates in the org that can help translate that.
Right. This episode is made possible with support from Avail. Is your firm managing architectural, landscape, interiors, and engineering content? Avail's all-in-one content management solution stretches across all disciplines, file types, and content locations so production teams can find everything they need all in one place. Thanks to Avail's desktop application and Revit, AutoCAD, and Civil 3D plugins, teams can consistently find and reuse all types of content, from specifications and calculations to 3D models and plans. As a result, standards-compliant models and drawings are easier to create. The documentation process is less chaotic, new hires are easier to onboard, and projects are delivered faster with fewer errors. Visit getavail.com to request a demo. That's GETAVAIL.com to request a demo. My thanks to Avail for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. Now let's get back to the conversation. Well, and you've worked in large organizations, and I'm curious, I mean, maybe let's put a bookmark here because I want you to tell your story because you talk about yourself as an enterprise transformation executive, right? And this that's a constantly evolving,
Mm-hmm.
changing land. It kind of has to be like, and so this gets back to what we were just talking about a minute ago, right? Which is, okay, that design problem's done. No, like transformation of an enterprise is a continuous thing. Like this is, it continues to evolve all the time. There's new technologies, there's new ways of doing things. There's old ways that no longer need to be a piece of this. We need to bury those. We need to send those things off, thank them for their service, and say goodbye.
We learn. We learn as an organization. You learn through all of
Right,
that, and it's okay. But there's a season for things, and then you
right.
move on. Hmm.
Yeah. Expiration dates on things. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I really want to hear your story about how you've gotten to where you are so that people can understand kind of the experiences that you've had to get
Sure.
to kind of this level of understanding of where we are and what you've done along the way.
Yeah. So I came into the world, professional world. I'll just start there. As I wanted to be a designer and save the world. I think everybody who goes into architecture has some component there. They're like, yes, I'm going to go and do this amazing thing as an architect. And I got out of school, NDSU, by the way, North Dakota State University. So a fairly technical organization or institution, but it was a great starting point for me in that I got to see some design as well as the technical strength that you need to have in architecture. So I came out into the world again thinking that, I think Autodesk at the time and vendors were feeding all of the technology to students for
Mm-hmm.
free, right? And you go,
Yeah.
oh, this is
Get
going
them
to be
hooked.
amazing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was like, would do all these modeling and everything.
Adobe was on the list.
I
Yeah,
mean,
they're all, yeah, right.
Form Z, like we was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is so cool. A long time ago. But I came out and going, okay, great. We've got all the tools. We're gonna do this amazing thing. And I worked on excellent projects with my first firm and got a really good handle on what it takes to execute a large scale educational project. And it was awesome to see. But what struck me is that I got out and I was probably not too dissimilar from others, just disillusioned by the fact that where did all the technology go? Where did all the we were on several versions back. We were, I was going, what is happening? And it kind of stuck with me. And as I learned early, endeavor of the craft of architecture, I was connecting with our specifications writers. We had a full service organization that I worked for, and I was able to work with our mechanical, electrical engineers, the plumbing engineers, the structural engineers, and have that dialogue early on. So I feel very fortunate to have seen all of that. But again, it was right about the time when I think Revit like really just sort of came on the scene, and the idea that adoption of technology at that time, all it required was to buy a license, hire somebody who knew it, and set them next to your, key design team people, and it would all of a sudden permeate the organization, and you'd be done. Move on. What's the next technology, right? And you're done. So that was the idea, and it wasn't unique to any one organization. I saw this across the board. It was
That mentality still exists.
it does. It does.
Yeah.
I think that people have seen that though and have evolved to some degree. And
Yeah,
I am
for sure.
hopeful. I have seen it, but I am hopeful that it is permeating further in the industry. And I was part of that. I sat next to the individual that was brought in, and they were supposed to now make us all capable. That capability part, you buy the resource, you bring it in, and then you make everybody capable and check the box. And I found it fascinating, and I said, okay, wow, this can solve some problems. And this here, we kind of got hooked on the technology, not just enamored like I would have been in college or in the university setting, but now truly as the force multiplier that technology is supposed to be, or as a means of communicating differently. And I saw that. And so I head first into that. At the same time, I'll just tell you, sort of round out my background. I was also just really hungry for something in the practice. And one of the leaders in the office was like, she's not going to stick around long if we don't give her something else to do. It's like, and I am grateful for them recognizing that, because I don't know if I would have stayed in the industry.
And you mentioned advocates a minute ago, right? Like that's what you're talking about. I mean, somebody's kind of just noticing that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that was pretty important, I think, trajectory wise for me. I went out and kind of targeted technology on my own. Revit user groups at the time were very in vogue, and simultaneously I was looking for my registration to complete my licensure, and it was like on the track to be an architect. I'm going to be an architect, and so I went with the AIA. They hooked me up with the AIA. I got really involved in at the time, the intern development program, now the AXP. And at the same time, because I was you couldn't keep me, I was like, I needed more things to do. So I went to the USGBC and became very involved in understanding that resurgence in sustainability at the time and getting their entire sort of leadership team accredited and going through that process. So I built a lot around how to mobilize people towards new things, right? How to get them introduced to becoming licensed architects, how to help them understand sustainability and practice through the LEED system, and then to adopt and implement technology, BIM, Revit at the time. And so those things were sort of like the core for me, and I started there. And as I did that, I got more and more involved in how we look at our business with technology at that level, right? At that, how do we execute projects? How do we meaningfully organize around this technology enabler? In doing so, then I ended up moving to a larger organization, and it was not a move that I was like, oh, I'm looking for this move. I've got to go make a move. I don't want to be here anymore. It was, I love what I'm doing. Somebody else came and saw that and said, we'd like you to love what you're doing over here. How's that? And so I was like, okay, I think that works for me. I think we can do that. So I moved, and I began working on that organization's sort of transformation journey. And it was a continuous sort of process of understanding where people are, meeting them where they are at in terms of their practice, and then helping them adopt technology to improve. So one of the things I learned out of that, and it sticks with me, is that people, you mentioned like having your stuff on your C drive and your tools, and you're like, I'm all tooled up and leave me alone, just doing my stuff, right? My stash. Yeah. Trying to train people and help them become transform the way that they work is very difficult once they have that stash established. If they've got that, so mid-level, kind of mid-level career folks have kind of gotten to that place where they're like, I know what I'm doing. Don't bother me.
This is how I do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can go home at night. I can hang out with my family. I can come in. I can be productive.
To be fair, those people have seen lots of digital transformation or technology initiatives totally fail, right? And it's like, oh, like all I can do is rely on myself, because
that'll go away.
My team can't adopt all the things that we were supposed to do. Like there's totally legitimate reasons for kind of acting like that.
Yeah, no, and empathizing with that is really part of what you have to do when you want to meet people where they're at and help them move past that.
I remember going to offices and talking with people in that role and just like seeing that frustration. They're just like, let me tell you how it's been before. How is it going to be different this time? Yeah. And that's real. It's totally real, all over the place.
Yeah. So I think when we go back to that statement about advocates, or advocates for individuals, but also advocates for a transformation or for the vision of the company, and making sure that they're looking at the field and understanding how people are receiving that message and how they can help them better digest it, right? And how it makes sense and actually helps them, as opposed to being something that they're like, oh, there's that thing again. We've got to, that's what they're saying. We have to follow that. toe the line, right? But it's really about giving them something that's meaningful for them to know that they're advancing not only their particular station, but their companies, their clients, and what they're doing. So we look at data, importance of data, and everybody has a role to play in that. So, I mean, you asked about my path, but you said we're going to wander. We're going to wander real quick. I went through the transformation sort of initiative there, and as it were, it wasn't very different that you go hire somebody and put them in place, and then everybody now knows it. We'll check the box. This was a little bit different in that it was a fun marketing target of 10, 10, 10, right? If I say 10, 10, 10, then we're going to be done. Ta-da! I was like, oh, everybody hurry up, we're going to be done. And we checked the box. We did. But what revealed itself was that, lo and behold, you're not checking a box. It's a continual process. Any technology integration is a continual process. It's going to evolve with the circumstances of the time, the circumstances of the projects, the business, all of that. So it's a continual process. And so I ended up at that point going back into project management, project architecture, and working on projects as any other, architect would. But I
because you were done?
I was done. We were done.
Okay.
We're done, done. Right? We were done. And of course, my job description.
You can be an architect again.
Yeah, right. I can be an architect. I'm like, never again, Evan. It was never again. Once you kind of take that step, I feel like that's probably, you should tell people, warning, if you're going to go in this direction, you may never come back. I am certainly there embedded in terms of the architectural origin for me, and that I see all of this as a design challenge. But no, I was never able to really truly go back. I did go back and do project management and project architecture. Worked on a couple of projects with VA and whatnot. But all the while, I was working with our project management office and working with our legal team to evaluate technology and contractual language around technology. I was working with an asset management team, understanding the contracts and how you deal with technology at a scale. And it was all of that while doing architecture stuff.
Because
right?
you've had a foot in both, and you can literally see the gaps and the opportunities everywhere you look, right? And you can't not see them.
No, you can't. And like I said, you can't unsee it. Once you see it, you're like, okay, you're over here now. And so it was always, whether it was in my explicit job description for that period of time, it was back in sort of traditional architecture, but they still had my number, right? They still had my number. They knew what I was doing.
And they knew that you were reliable and that you had that insight, and so you were on the short list of. You were in the favorites list of on the dial pad.
Right? No matter how hard I tried, right? I was like, oh no, just leave me alone. At one point, this is funny reminiscing. Yeah, funny reminiscing that talk about behaviors of teams that have these capabilities and how they integrate into an organization and support it as well. I mean, that's with technology these days. You put up the do not disturb, or I'm not here, look away.
Yeah, out of office,
Right. At that period of time when I was back architecting, if you will, I had people like that, they had my number and they would come to me and how do I? And I was like, at one point I was so strapped I had so many things on my projects to take care of that I don't have bandwidth to do all of this. And this is the danger of having those technologists, practitioners, I just didn't have the bandwidth to do what people needed. And so I turned around and I said, F1, use F1, or let me Google that for you. I was like, but F1 at the time, this was before let me Google that for you. So I
had a shortcut, like one of those text replacement shortcuts. It was like colon or a semicolon, LMG, right? And so it was somebody would ask something, and it was just like I would actually send them the "Let me Google that for you" link, just to be a little snarky.
Yeah, I was probably not as just around at some point. I was like, F1, please F1. So it's fun to build those skills and to know those things, but then you move beyond that because you see that that's not going to just bringing in a resource and setting them next to somebody else is not going to help transform the organization. Just answering those questions and being as efficient as you can to help somebody get their project out the door, while it's helpful and wonderful and team oriented, that does not transform the organization. And what I saw early, even earlier before I went through this, I saw that as I need to fix this. We need to work on this design challenge as an industry.
It's more valuable to spend time doing that and solving it across the organization than it is to just these little touch points, and that just everybody kind of keeps spinning in that downward spiral. It's like, how do you get out of that? You have to address it at the organizational level.
Right. That's what I am. I am very much looking at organizations now and understanding where their breakdown is in terms of that resource, the cash, the capability, and the clarity, right? The vision, that if they have a vision, if they understand that they are going to put resources to it, money, time, people, and that they have the capability, whether they have it today, they're growing it, they're fostering it, or they're going to acquire it and bring it in, right? Like that's all of those things are earmarks of success in this area. And I see lots of differences in organizations of how much they're willing to do in those areas. And you'll see different approaches to acquire. Like, let's go acquire. Let's go get that one skill and bring that into our merged teams, right? That's one way to try and build the capability. And then there's the noble effort of let's grow it and let's develop it in-house. And I feel like this is one of those, I like analogies. I speak in analogies quite often, but it's kind of like a nutrient-dense food versus the GMO, right? The big puffy strawberry versus like something that's really dense and tasty. Like that looks really impressive and you got there really fast. But this is, it took time to grow this, and this is really good. And I think that they have different places, right?
Yes.
There's a place for different approaches. But to see that and understand where, I think smaller organizations, we did talk about this too, smaller or larger organizations and what that means in terms of transformation. I think smaller organizations inherently are more nimble. They can move more quickly. But they tend to lack that stability and potentially access to resources, right? So then you kind of go, okay, we're going to grow and we're going to lean heavily into developing our teams, or we have some team members that are really, really strong in these areas. So we have that locked down. And then we have a clear vision. And now it's a matter of how do we, how many resources, how much money do we need to make this happen? And I think people can kind of balance that triad out a little bit differently. But yeah.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to invite you to join the most influential technology leaders in the AEC industry at Confluence. Composed of in-person events and a podcast co-hosted by yours truly, Confluence is designed to foster conversations between AEC firms and technology companies so they can learn, share, and engage with each other to support industry innovation. Software company Avail, which creates content management solutions for the AEC industry, started hosting Confluence events in 2019 to understand what firms are needing, wanting, and thinking around technology. To learn more about Confluence, explore upcoming events, and listen to podcast episodes, go to confluence.getavail.com. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the TRXL podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. Well, let's talk about that kind of intentional growth idea, because I'm curious how you've approached doing that in the past. I mean, a lot of firms are just trying to keep their head above water. There's no resources in-house to develop people on a continual basis, whether that's a digital solution or a real people training solution or, an academy or even why that's important, right? It's like they don't have that because they're just so busy trying to deliver projects, right? And so I'm curious like how you've approached that in the past, because you talked about kind of being at that first job and having that advocate who was there who says like, because if you're going to invest in people, then you have to keep those people around too, right? Because otherwise, when they leave, I mean, and I've heard the ridiculous arguments before of like, we don't offer training because what happens when those people leave? They just take that training somewhere else, and they get the benefit of it. And it's like, well, okay, because you have to address keeping those people here and keeping them happy and engaged and challenged and growing, because it's a career. Like they want to develop professionally throughout their career. Architecture is definitely that kind of career, right? So I'm really curious to hear how you've approached this problem in the past, this challenge.
I will say I don't have the silver bullet, but I do have the earmarks, right? I believe that there is those tenets that I mentioned, right? The clarity, giving people clarity and having them understand the mission and the vision and their part in it is really important. But the transfer of knowledge is something that is critical, and all these things are kind of coming together, Evan, like the meeting them where they are is recognizing where people are and saying, here, we're going to go here together. We need to get here. This is the target and this is what we want to do. And working with them to develop their skills or to respond to their needs and to what they see in the organization as necessary.
How do you assess that? Because in a large organization, I'm sure a lot of people are kind of protecting their imposter syndrome kind of feelings, right? It's like, oh, yeah, I know how to do this stuff. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Like, how do you really assess that in an organization so that there's honesty? Because the goal, like, there's many times where I've tried to implement technology that's like, it feels Big Brother-ish, right? Because it's like, well, let's track this. Let's see the behavior that's actually happening. Like, how long do things take? And people get scared about that because it's like, well, now they're watching me. And but there's this proactive stance, which is like, we want to help you get better. We want to identify the gaps. We want to, and you have to be really clear about that. But I'm curious how you've kind of overcome that in the past, because it's hard to get authentic answers from people to understand where they truly are.
Humans are right. Yeah. No, I would say that anymore, you talk about the measurements and the understanding what's going on and getting a clear diagnostic of the situation. That's important. And we have the capability to do that now. And so what is important and the is really actually following up on that observation and that those metrics that you're taking is like, okay, where are the gaps maybe in the practices that people are employing? Where are those opportunities where they could maybe do this instead of this? And we could help them. Well, you need to actually act on that, to train them, to empower them, or to help them improve and give them a path that allows them to improve. But not to shame anybody, not to call anybody out or to target them, but to say, okay, look, we need to be clear and look in the mirror and see what we're doing and understand where we are at. That is the only way to improve. And that is a collective, again, that vision as an organization of here's what we are going to do. Here's what we're going to do about it. And as we find opportunities, this will help us set our priorities for how we invest in our people and how we invest in our capabilities. And I think doing that helps people understand that you're not there just to be Big Brother, not to just catch somebody doing something wrong.
Yeah.
But when you start to measure those things, you better be prepared to do something about it. Because the whole picture here is that we have so much data, so much data. And for what? To confuse the AI that's going to help you summarize something, or to pull up the wrong information at the wrong time? The data is really, really important, and we need to understand that through and through. So when we look at data around how our project teams are functioning, how our quality is being realized or maybe not realized, we need to be able to look at that and go, now we do something. We actually act upon that decision-driven sort of analysis, not just, look, I have data. You know, I think that's the thing that we're facing right now, is that we are enamored by access to data and being able to make charts and make flow, all these things, fun things that like pie charts, and nobody likes pie charts, donut charts, whatever the preferred method is. Oh, look, I can make this chart, but what are you going to do about it? I think that is the question. And about people, it's important to do something for them.
This idea, like the importance of knowing thyself. Who are we? What are our capabilities in a really honest way is so important, right? Because there's like the version that we think people see us as, which is like this outward facing. And then there's like the reality of it. And really understanding the reality of it is the only way that you can chart that path forward, so that you can act on those things, so that you can increase the capabilities of one of your 3 C's, right? To do better, to do whatever those things are, you know, whatever your goals and your values are. So it's that, and you mentioned like humans, right? So
affectionately, it's human. Humans are humans, and we all have our things, right? And
it's tricky.
It is tricky. There's a song for that.
And humans are clever. Clever at hiding things, because you don't want people to know that you don't know how to do this, or you're not whatever. And then there's genuinely times where it's like, I didn't even know that was a possibility. Nobody ever showed me that, right? So there's so many gaps.
And I think it's not even as it's not intentional. It's certainly not intentional in most cases that I've explored and seen. There are different aspects of a practice, and I'll say from the technology lane there, but cybersecurity and data security and all of that is a real big deal. It's a real big deal for our organizations in the AEC, not just us as organizations, as designers and contractors and that deliver work, but the owners that we work for and work with, and the whole ecosystem. It's a shared responsibility. However, you see assumptions being made in each of these areas, because nobody can know it all, and it's not possible. So from a design perspective, a design team is going out and saying, look, not trying to be crafty, not trying to be risky, but they're like, look, I have a challenge here, micro design problem. I've got to get this information over here as quickly as possible. I talk to these people and these people. I do it this way, and I move it through this system, and I do it. And then it gets there, and look how fast I can do that. I've met my vision for us improving, productivity, improving speed to delivery, all of that. And they're feeling pretty proud, and they're great. And even at the higher level, you're like, look, you did it. Great. But not to diminish it with security is thinking, oh, good, you're doing it. We gave you a secure system to work in. Fantastic. Good job. But they didn't realize all the mechanics that person went through to get this out the door. And meanwhile, they took a trip out into an environment or two in which we have now opened a gap for security, right? You've now shared it in a place where it's not supposed to be. You didn't do it, right? You didn't do it on purpose, or you didn't do it with malintent. No, you just said, oh, look at this is the path of least resistance for this.
Convenience, right?
Right? And it was, and you felt successful, but that's warring against other things. So it's this idea that there's not a visibility that allows anybody to know everything. So it's the talking and the communication of that vision and sharing the development of that vision. And then at every level, making sure it translates. So when there's in the security organization, you talk about protecting data, protecting pathways, reducing exfiltration of data, all of that. And then they have to take what they know, and they have to observe, and they have to pay attention to what's going on in the operations side, and use their knowledge to understand better what the others are doing, and vice versa. So this communication has to happen at all levels to see what your impact is on the bigger picture. And in talking with all those areas and talking with the core technology leadership and then the practitioners and the design technologists and whatnot, and how the mechanics work, I'm like, there's some things that need to be understood. The clients themselves don't even necessarily know when they're asking for meet this requirement because my people tell me it's the safest way to go. And then they also say, meet this other requirement because it tells the people tell me that'll be the fastest way to get my project done. And I was like, they don't always match up. They don't always match up. And owners need to be able to look at that as well. So back to like the path for me, I was going through, projects work for a couple of years, and then they pulled me into corporate, not corporate, but for architecture. I worked with architecture on digital design and practice innovation, and had a couple of really sharp individuals working on sort of content development and practices for clash detection and things like that. And then computational design and data-driven design initiative under Matt Goldsberry and the team there is fantastic to be present for that. But all of that while in a parallel lane, working with the National Institute of Building Sciences, then BIM Council, now Design Technology or Digital Technology Council, looking at that with owners and that part of the industry as well, and having conversations with many other owner organizations around what their expectations for technology are. I'm going, there's just gaps. You recognize that there are gaps, and so closing those gaps is part of this transformation. Like, you need to close those gaps to be able to have true transformation between your clients, your design team, your contractors, the whole kit and caboodle.
And all of those are changing landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
They're just evolving, right? Do you have any examples of what some of those gaps are that are just like glaring that we need to address now?
The gap that I see significantly is this gap of the cybersecurity. We are driving so hard towards the collaborative, fluid, fast-paced, let's make it faster, let's connect everything, and there's complications just in that all by itself. But to do that in a way that's secure is challenging, cost prohibitive in some cases, but the expectation is still there. That is one that I actually had a mouthful of a title, but it was a gathering, if you will, of about 50 invited industry representatives from FedRAMP to larger construction organizations. Globally, we had individuals from that wrote parts of ISO 19650 join us in terms of security, and large organizations sort of got together and had a meeting of the minds, if you will, to talk about the cybersecurity, the age of cybersecurity, and what that's doing to our ability to collaborate. And really, it was that conversation. It was like, here's the expectation, and here is the expectation, and here's how we're meeting these expectations, and they are not aligning, right? Where you got generally a cybersecurity team that's saying, here is your pathway, here's what you do, and here's the practitioners and the collaborators on the project saying, well, if you want us to collaborate, here's how it works. And so that is bringing all about the FedRAMP journey for most vendors right now, trying to achieve that and help improve the way that we share and collaborate. So it's in progress and people are making strides, but that is, I think, a significant one to keep an eye on, certainly, especially as we move more and more data around.
Yeah, because collaborate doesn't just mean like 5 people working in a Miro board, right? It means all kinds of things. It means, where do the models go? How do they get there?
Mm-hmm.
What about all of the other ways that we communicate around a project internally and externally? And it's not just email, and it's not just chats, and it's not just shared docs, and it's like
as if that's
all
not
of
enough.
The services that as if that's not enough.
as if that's not enough. I mean, that part, realizing that architecture and technology together, I mean, it's fascinating, but we are communicating. We're constantly communicating. We are looking at how we develop solutions. And at the myopic level, it feels like, okay, that's complex all by itself. But then you think about that organizationally and industry wide, and how we collaborate even beyond that team doing that work to everything. And it can quickly become overwhelming, but it's really important work to be done, and to understand if you set, again, a vision, a core vision for what you're doing and how you're going to operate, and make that translation of that vision for everybody at every level of the organization, down to the team working day in and day out on that project, getting that project out the door. Right. Important. Cybersecurity is a whole ball of wax, but
yeah, and because what this brings up in my mind is, projects take a long time, and we work on. If you're on a project team, you probably are following that project for a lot, if not all of that project. It depends. There's so many different ways to do it. It's hard to, you can't just say there's one way to do it. And so when you've got a team who did it, delivered a project 3 years ago on this school, and now they need to do it again, I guarantee you the way that we do it has changed. But they don't know that. They don't know how it's changed. And so how do you, because what you're talking about to me says, we need a lot of hand-holding, or we need systems in place that tell people in a just-in-time kind of a way, which seems a lot more, distribution-wise doable than hand-holding.
Yes.
Then you've got to have all of that codified and current, and like I mentioned earlier, like dismiss the old ways of doing things and say, we don't do it like that anymore. We only do it this way. And now we're starting to talk standards, and standards are something that are designed to be out of date, like immediately, right?
The second they're created.
Yeah. Dead documents, right?
I think that if you approach if you think standards as being just a document, it quickly becomes out of date. But having a structure in which people can understand quickly how to do something. So it is designing a system that people can plug into. 3 years ago, they did something. Now they're going to start and do something new. They can plug into the system and go, okay, how does this translate now? I think that there's a resource piece. And of course, now the AI, the agents and the bots of like, okay, well, you do have to keep current practice documented and communicated somewhere.
That capture part.
Right? It's got to be somewhere. Yeah. So there's still an exercise that has to be acknowledged and managed. But as far as the uptake and the just-in-time component, there are ways that can be more palatable, more accessible. The bots, and you can go and ask questions, and you can quickly say, okay, how do I do this? And they'll give you cues and clues from that repository. So
as long as they have quality inputs, right? Because that's a hard part right there. Like that's friction in the process is I don't have time to document the way that I did this thing. I mean, I'm guilty of this myself. I'm not just casting judgment on everybody else, but it's like I'm trying to develop systems for how I run my business, and I don't take the time to document all of those decisions and my thought process, and then how they changed during the process so that I could. I don't do that, and I understand why there's friction there, because it gets in the way of doing your job. That's what we think, right? But this is actually part of doing your job.
It is actually part of doing your job, and behaving a little bit differently now than maybe we would 10, 15 years ago, is to say, what is it that's going to help me do this faster the next time? Future
me,
right? I had somebody recently I loved it. It was like, oh, that's a future me problem. And I was like, oh, I'm going to use that too. That's a future me problem. But the...
You're welcome, future me.
Yes. Speaking of kick the can, it is that organizational design, though, is it meant to support a transforming or a constantly transforming organization, and which means it's staying current. And that is, do you have the things in place that will acknowledge that there is time that's needed to
Right.
document, to capture, and not setting somebody in there as a librarian day in and day out, like that's all you're doing is just writing things. But it's about understanding what's happening in the organization and what is going to be information that will inform and help people move more quickly. And speaking of that, I don't know if did we talk about the time situation? I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Nathan Wood, or Construction Progress Coalition, or just chatting back and forth, and something, of course, AI related came up, and it was about this idea that time, we're fixated on productivity. We're fixated on how quickly can we do something? How quickly can we achieve this outcome? And we're fixated on the wrong thing. We're so fixated on the wrong thing. Time is not a measure of value or of quality all unto itself. And so if we only fixate on the thing that people can easily, readily point to right now, and I say easily and readily, I still think that there's challenges in obtaining that marker, right? That benchmarking of time. Just, it is difficult to some degree, but that is the one thing that is somewhat tangible. Because if you say, let's track quality, what does that mean? How do you track quality? How do you say, well, this was a
subjective,
a strawberry that was grown from the land that was not genetically modified. It was rich. It has like all the nutrients. It has great soil, right? That's how do you measure that in terms of our product and our architecture and our work? So they go, let's point to time. We're fixated on time. So if I can make this faster, 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 and then by the time we have set everybody on that path and that vision, they have now worked themselves out of a job, worked us out of more work, right? Because we now can do it faster. Just churn that thing out and be done. And quickly, maybe we'll have an AI bot that does everything. It'll do the MEP model for us. It'll do all of the coordination, and we just push a button. And maybe we have two people that really are really necessary on that whole thing. And I was like, we're fixating on the wrong thing. And not in terms of like just self-preservation, but in terms of actual quality of output and product and what this world is as a result of the architecture that's established. And if we can shift people to say, yes, productivity is important, but not because it reduces the time we need to take. It means that we can invest that time in things that make this product better. And one of the, it was really compelling. I'd spoken with somebody who had used, augmented their project with AI, right? They'd use these tools, amazing tools that could quickly expedite documentation efforts, things that are sort of totally programmed and can be taken over by AI. Awesome. We're seeing that benefit. I said, so how do you think that works for you? And they were telling me it was amazing because they could take that team and that team could then learn more about the project. They went on site, they learned about the site, and they learned about what the project needed, and they could actually take time to be intentional about their design.
All the things we learned how to do in school, but have completely gotten away from because of the enablement of technology. What do you mean? I'll just pull it up on Google Earth. I'll pull it up on Google Maps. I'll do a site visit.
Yeah, right. A virtual site visit. No, not to dissuade people from doing, reality capture on sites. Those are really, really helpful and really important. But to get out there and to actually engage, even while in the construction phase, certainly when you're doing things there, to be able to be part of that process. Design build. There's lots of things you need more time to really understand what's going on than is afforded by us putting our heads down into the computers and just saying, okay, I'll just send them a message somewhere, right? Like we're worried about knowledge transfer in the industry. We're worried about the quality of our work product. All of these things can be offset or can be improved by engagement and different kinds of engagement, by engagement of people to people talking. And I don't mean you have to be literally face to face, high-fiving physically to be able to knowledge transfer. I believe knowledge transfer can happen with some virtual enablement, but more connectivity, more engagement, sharing that vision and sharing what you're, why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing. It doesn't have to be all turned into a manufacturing exercise. And I think that's what sort of people have been fearing for a long time. The Chicken Littles running around and like, oh, the sky is falling, we're going to end up like Wall-E. And I'm like, okay, no, we have opportunities to make choices here. And the choice is to invest in proper capabilities, proper tooling, and then to do that structurally as an organization where we grow really qualified individuals, we facilitate good work product, and that we think sustainably about a long-term plan for an organization. Like, that's important. And all these tools technology is never has been the be all and end all. It is a tool, and it is a great space for people to really invest in career development and being experts in that area. But those experts in technology implementation will not succeed unless their organization embraces that as part of a strategic goal. I feel like I've seen this in peers and in organizations that I've been a part of, that I've observed from outside, is that imbalance of seeing it as an other thing. And
Yes,
if it is othered, it cannot be truly sort of leveraged, and there's a cap. And I think that's what needs to be unleashed now, is that the technology is not dominating the strategy. Technology is not, it feels like it ought to right now with the pace of technology transformation in the world. But technology cannot dominate it all by itself. It has to be partnered with a clear sort of business and performance objective.
Hey everyone, I want to take 30 seconds to talk about something that really matters to me. This podcast exists because I believe this industry deserves better conversations. No agenda, no corporate backing, just honest, in-depth dialogue with the people actually shaping where AEC is headed. More than 25,000 of you listen to this show, and less than 50 of you are direct supporters of what I'm doing. And I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. I'm saying it because if this kind of independent media matters to you, if these conversations have ever changed how you think or introduced you to someone worth knowing, then the most direct way to keep it going is to become a TRXL Plus member. $12 a month, ad-free episodes, the full Leadership Edge newsletter with my deep dives and the things I don't say on the podcast, and the knowledge that you're one of the people making this possible. Head over to the website at trxl.co and click the join button. And either way, I'm really glad that you're here. Now let's get back to today's conversation.
So,
yeah, like part of the narrative that I kept hearing from very influential people in the industry is that you're not an architecture firm, you're a technology firm that happens to do architecture. Right? It was just like, this was a borrowed line from other industries, for sure. I mean, I'm sure I heard this even from the main stage at Autodesk University. I don't know for sure. But, I mean, I kind of roll my eyes at that because that, to me, is exactly the opposite of why did we choose to go into this profession in the beginning at all, right? And it wasn't, like you said, like technology isn't the end-all, be-all. It's a means of how to get there. It's an enabler of how to do the thing that we actually want to do, which is, like you said, change the world. Like, I want to change the world.
Change the world, right? Like,
you're not.
It's an enabler, a force multiplier, but we also have to be careful with these things that we're using and the impacts that it's having on our communities and our world and how that functions. I mean, it's an economic disruptor at the very least, an economic disruptor, and those factors change. I think as an architecturally trained architect, I probably have to recognize my bias, right? That I feel like, architects can have an influence and can change things for the better, for the worse. I mean, making wrong
There's
choices.
responsibility there, for sure.
You can make choices for the worst, but that we are here to help society participate in a design challenge. I think everything is, right? Everything is, you look at inputs from all different aspects, you think about different perspectives, you bring that all together and you have to make informed decisions. And it's fascinating and fun, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is.
Technology cannot save us, but it certainly can get in the way. It can certainly, so we have to kind of mitigate that by the choices we make.
As an architecturally trained architect / technologist, I also hold that bias. And I'm just curious what you think in our industry how that benefits you. Because, I mean, you just kind of spoke to it, right? It's like this ability to see a bigger landscape, synthesize lots of inputs coming from all different directions. There's many technologists in our field who are coming at this from a technology side, like more of an information technology side, and don't see everything as a design problem. They don't see it as they just, architects think a little differently, right?
I'll just say we're weird, we're quirky, and we have everybody has a superpower. I truly believe that everybody has whatever it is. Everybody's got some different superpowers. I think whether we came to it, the question of chicken or the egg, did we develop the skills as an architecture sort of synthesis, or did we have it and we all just sort of like got together and said, hey, we're the people that do this thing? I don't know. But the idea that we need to be able to reflect everybody else back to themselves a little bit. And I think that's how you find solutions, is and I was listening to early on, having the exposure to all the different disciplines, all the different engineering disciplines, along with architecture and interiors, and was really, I'll say, formative, because I was able to understand their perspective. I wasn't behind a wall of like, oh, I got to call over there and maybe talk to an engineer. I didn't know who they were. No, literally they were 2 desks down. I could talk to them, or they were just a quick phone call away, and I knew them by name. And having the ability to recognize that there were different perspectives, I think, is part of the architectural sort of training, is saying, you know what, you're not going to answer all the questions all by yourself. Good luck with that. But if you know that there are others out there that have answers, you bring them together, you talk about it, and you pull that idea together from multiple perspectives. Like being able to tap into that, I think that is what architecture is truly about. And sometimes it lends itself into a more creative space, and sometimes more utilitarian, but the process is really important, that all of it takes into account. People may not agree on the outcomes, right? There's reality is that people may not agree on whether they like or dislike the outcomes of any part of architecture, but the process is the important part, as that you have taken into account all the factors and all the impacts of those perspectives and made an informed decision. And
so this bias that I have is the whole reason I wanted to go down this path is confirmation bias. But like, it's super important to have somebody in a position like the ones that you're talking about here, digital practice leaders, CTO level kind of strategy and implementation, and having a foot on the architecture side to understand the practice and the visions and the goals and the why of all of this that is the kind of person that I would want to advocate for in these companies who are looking to do these kinds of transformations, to look for those kinds of people. And they're out there. Like, that's, to me, this is one of the cool things that has become, I would say, a development maybe in the last decade, is those people are out there now, where before it was like we always bought those people. They were IT professionals. They were
and you tried to transform
operational.
Try to transform them, right? To right. Yeah. I think it's a timing thing. I think it's certainly a timing thing, and timing and experience of individuals having gone through the past 20 years of technology, how it's transformed just in general, and then being able to take that and understand the practice of, like I said, transforming through design process is understanding what that takes and being able to now look at it more clearly. And that is what my fascination is really to look at how organizations can transform as a design exercise and truly make transformation real, not just a technology initiative. Because a technology initiative can get you a ways. It can be a nice charm. It can be successful in certain pockets, but it's not going to transform overall. And I think transformation is what we are in for right now.
Ooh, that's really interesting. So what you just made me think of was I've gone through some stuff in the last 2 years where there's always been like this intentional effort put into a thing, but then having the realization at some point that I am going to allow this thing to change me. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but it's like, okay, I'm putting in the effort, I'm going through the steps, I'm doing this thing, and I'm participating and contributing. But at some point, I actually had to mentally like flip a switch and say, oh, like, I'm seeing these differences, but I'm not letting it change me. I'm still pushing, and I'm not letting it come back in and fill me up from the inside as a different expression now. And I had to like flip that switch, literally. And so like you talk about digital transformation is going to get you, like this technology initiative is going to get you so far. But then like the firm actually has to realize, okay, what has that done to us? Who are we now? And then repeat
and
or...
it's that, and continue, right? That continual transformation.
It's
so it's kind of
flywheel
like
feedback
setting
loop
up,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
It's setting it up on a, it's not, and I hesitate. I said it a couple times about, it's a design process, and you and I can talk about that affectionately as a design process. And I feel like there may be others that would say that, like, oh, it's going to cost money. This is gonna cost money. So you know what?
They see it as expense, not
is
investment.
an expense, not an investment. I think that is the biggest miss, is that, and it's not unfounded though. If we treat it as a technology initiative,
Well, there's a lot of fails.
and there's a lot of what is it? I think it was like 70%.
I think it's higher than that.
70.
I think
maybe.
Nathan Miller says it's over 80%.
Yeah, I think it was
digital
a
transformation.
McKinsey report I saw was like 70, but 80. I mean, either way, a tremendous amount of transformation.
I've heard it be in the 90s now because everything's moving so fast.
99% of them fail. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.
But they fail. And I believe that is really tied to organizational health and organizational structural enablement of transformation. If you don't have a core within the organization that understands technology is an investment, it's also a potential giant black hole to put money into if it's not managed correctly. But to put the mirror up and to understand exactly where you're at, what's your capability, what is it that you need, what are the gaps, and how do we make a holistic plan around that, not in a let's boil the ocean kind of way, because I think that's real easy to do now too, is that, oh, well, we have to have everything. We have to have a completely AI-enabled soup to nuts, everything is done, and we'll be firing everybody in 6 months. That's hear about that. What did I heard? Recently this is happening left and right, where there's like, oh yes, we're gonna.
And now they're talking about rehiring a lot of those people.
And they're like, whoops!
Yeah, how short-sighted that was.
Whoops! Right? And like, you can't make knee-jerk reactions like that. You can't take action that quickly without some repercussion. So having a clear-minded team working on this as an organization, I think, is the really important piece about how transformation is going to succeed in the future. 70, 80, 90% of them fail. I think those that will succeed will have a solid organizational structure behind them that takes measured steps towards the it used to be all about innovation, transformation, whatever we're calling it, evolution of our practice in the industry. That's what's going to happen is those that can kind of get their arms around the proper structure and making decisions that are supportive of that vision. That'll be the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a great place to wrap this up, but I don't want to yet. I have one more
questions.
Because I think a lot of the assumptions that I've been making throughout this conversation is really thinking about the audience of who's in the firm who pushes back against transformation, and it tends to be the older generations, but we have to be realistic here. Like there's many generations in a firm. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious when it comes to dealing with the younger end of that spectrum, because it's a completely different set of expectations, scar tissue. Like there's very little of it, mm-hmm. right? It's like things like that. They're excited and passionate and green, right? And, mm-hmm. and I've classified this previously as like the greens and the grays, right? You've got the stalwarts who've been around for a long time and they do things the way they've always done them, and they resist, and then there's the greens who are like they don't know what they don't know, and mm-hmm. and at the same time they don't reach out to ask questions because that requires human to human interaction. Obviously, I'm generalizing on both ends of the spectrum.
Yep.
But I'm curious from your perspective when it comes to the next generation of architects and technologists, and it's way more blended than that's ever been before. Like, what's your experience dealing with across generations in these larger organizations when it comes to technology and adoption and implementation, like bridging those gaps between, seeing those gaps and then trying to find ways over them?
So you kind of reminded me of something that I was talking recently about, and it was the knowledge transfer situation that we have, or the gap mm-hmm. that we have, and where tools like AI are coming in. And if we are not aware of what it's doing, we get enamored by the fact that it makes things faster. We get enamored by the fact that it's productivity enhancing. And we start to erode the sort of middle. We've got folks that come in and can push the buttons and know how to navigate, make the thing do the thing, right? But you've got that's the greens, and you've got the grays who have this experience, they've gone through all of this, and they know, okay, I can also push these buttons because it's accessible, right? It's not like it requires
more now than ever.
Right. It's super accessible, right? They can push those buttons and they're like, look, oh my gosh, this validates what I know to be true. Or, you know what, that's kind of off. And then they can make tweaks.
They have that experience, that knowledge.
They know that.
Yeah. Right.
The greens don't have that. They can mobilize. Right. But what this does is it essentially allows the grays to say, okay, you guys over there, guys, gals, you folks, push these buttons and I'll get you the right result. I'll make sure you're good, right? I'll just go, yep, that looks good. And they can validate that. But the folks that are new to the process and haven't gone through it have no understanding of it's black box to them. And then they just take it as, oh, well, the calculator produced this number, and so it's good. It's got to be good. To some degree, we can remove fat in the system, right? We can remove some of that stuff, and it's not enriching. It was just work that had to be done. But there is value in going through the process. So if we take that process entirely out, what are we doing to the knowledge transfer and to the future of design practice? Like that to me is sort of the thing to be paying attention to right now, is that we don't get rid of the entire sort of middle because, what's the value add in the process of architecture?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that have been introduced since we've introduced AutoCAD and technology, right? There are things that are like, well, we had to do it because we had to spit out a drawing. But what if we needed to no longer create a drawing because that was and for all intents and purposes, an ETL, right? We extracted from the brain, we put it in a computer, and then we made some changes, and then we shipped it over to somebody else so that they could intake it into their brain, right? It was a visual sort of transfer of that. Now we can do much better in that we will just Johnny mnemonic, plug in from the designer's brain to the contractor's brain, it'll all be good. But in all seriousness, there's a value in going through some work to develop a process or an outcome. And if we forgo that, are we going to end up with that GMO strawberry that's just big, puffy, and looks great?
Yeah, because I mean, this to me, it's like software has made kind of everything a video game now, right? It's like describe the output and boom, this beautiful
Ta-da.
image. And you didn't have to learn what it took to actually make something, anything. It doesn't have to be that. It could be something small scale too. And that is concerning. It's like I have kids who they'd rather play a video game about snowboarding than go snowboarding. Why? Because snowboarding hurts. Like
Fact. However,
You know
with the fresh air and the experience and the, right?
or they just think I'm an expert snowboarder now. Like I just downloaded the Kung Fu program via the Matrix, right? And now I know how to do it. And then you actually go snowboarding and you understand like how much nuance there is to putting a little bit more pressure on your toe edge when you're making this turn and what that does and where you put your weight transfer and how does all that work on this slippery surface, and how do you develop that? By doing it and by falling a lot. And like I just don't see us like there's definitely from the older generations this view of, oh man, everybody's totally failing at this. Like you can't build that. Here's the problems. The door swings aren't right. The room's labeled wrong. Why is there a toilet in the entry? Like all the things that you can say are easily pick out just through your years of experience of pattern recognition of like what's wrong with this plan kind of a thing, or what's wrong with this image. So they're seeing these failures, but the people who are doing it don't see it as failures. They see it as magic. And they see it as like, oh, I'm just stepping in. Like, look at me, like what I can do. And man, that to me, there's a big disconnect there of like this video gamification of, especially for the younger generations, of what it is to be an architect, a practicing architect, where that thing has to get built. It has to serve a client. It has to meet these energy demands. It has to meet the building code. It has to meet the site. All of those kinds of things are not part of that video game process yet.
Right.
And it's, I mean, we're in a tricky spot there, I think, because we're kind of training people for this expectation of what it's like to go into a profession, and then they get there and they're like, oh my God, it's not what I thought it was. And are they even going to stick around to become the potential that they could, or are they just going to be like, I'm out?
Very full circle, Evan. Very full circle.
Because that's what you said.
What is this? What is this profession? Yeah, I feel like there is something when looking at in particular the visualization space for AI. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. You can basically say, make this building, make it look like this, and it'll spit out a visual that looks really impressive, right? And I go back to that race to the bottom conversation of like, if we can do it faster, we can do it faster, we can do it faster. Well, obviously we can do it cheaper, right? So then you're sort of undercutting yourself if that's the value. If producing that visual in and of itself is the value, or if producing the sheet set for our buildings is the value, we're going to get that down to next to nothing. Like that timing is going to be next to nothing. I've seen it. I see it. But that's not the value. I could do that. Anybody can do that on their phone. It's like, oh, give me a visual of this, and ta-da, you're done. But what about the decision-making process? It's about decision-making, about working with the client and looking at all those factors. Like I said, you may not like the output at the very end of the day. Different firms have different philosophies, different design and construction teams have different ways about going about things, and owners have different views for what they want to do with their resources and their time and whatnot. So it's not about the outcome. I love to think about architectural criticism and things like that, but it's the process. And the process is important no matter what the outcome is. And the process is, what kind of finances do I have? What kind of time do I have? What are the impacts to the inhabitants of the space or to the community that it sits within? Those are process points and things you have to go through that you can't just punch into a thing and just say print, right? Like it has to be, you have to think. through those as a collective, because again, that organizational structure in a firm, the structure in a community, people don't go through just massive change and accept it. They have to be part of it, or to be informed. You have to have, whether or not you want to, things will change. But the easier changes are ones that you actually work through and people are participant in. And that doesn't mean you have to seek consensus at every turn. That's not what I'm saying, but it's more about the communication and understanding throughout a transformative process. And the process at the smallest level of design thinking is a little bit about transformation, transforming what is in, several people's brains and visions coming together to make one output. At the level of just project, space design to building design to site design to infrastructure design to community design and all of those things. I'm clearly affected by the architecture bug in my architecture training, but it's about the process. So if we use technology and we inadvertently shortcut that, I am concerned that would be a problem for us long term. And that might be our biggest problem.
We've seen time and time again that this efficiency kind of sales pitch on everything has never really worked on architects. Architects just fill that time up with other stuff, more detail. I mean, that's kind of what BIM allowed us to do, right? Was like, oh, let's model everything now, even if you're never going to see it. Remember back in the day when compute was expensive and we did renderings, it was like we pick a view and we model that view. We don't model what's behind us because we don't have to look there yet.
That's expensive, so we'll just do this. Yes.
Yeah, and so then, okay, now we're working in 3D all the time. Now we kind of have to have it all in there, and so we will we'll do that. We'll add detail. So do you see it going, like what direction do you see it going, short term, long term? Maybe those are two different stories, but it's like, yeah, maybe things happen faster, but architects still operate under this time scale of a project in these phases, and that's not changing really yet. I mean, I'm sure it is for some.
You see little shifts and changes or nods to evolving that. I think and it's sorry. There was a graphic that came out recently, Anthropic. You may have seen
the spider graph.
The spider graph, right? And then architecture, right? There's this giant gap. I was like,
it was like construction. It was
all different industry, right? But
that graph, just to be clear, like I actually posted a funny graph that somebody else posted of the spider graph that they wish they had seen, and it was like capacity for AI and it was like washing the dishes, walking the dog. It was like all
the things I wanted to do for me,
the things you wanted to do. But that graph was actually, I think it was 2023 that data was collected, and they specifically say in the report that it was put together by people who had no clear understanding of those different fields. It was just like, so anyway.
I was just going to say, because I'm like, I was kind of going to say to that, I'm like, the gap is the gap because the gap is probably going to remain that gap. I feel like there's too much important nuance right, in that space. And that doesn't mean that we can just dismiss it and be like, oh, we aren't going to take advantage of that. But productivity is important because it allows people to go home and have dinner with their families. Productivity is important because it allows them to take advantage of that time and meet with the clients and have a better, engagement with that project or that output. But it is not the thing that we should be targeting as our hold this up and say, hey, we succeeded, we've gotten faster. What we need to be doing is understanding better what the performance of that overall is, the quality metrics. What constitutes quality? Does it mean that we have, and we'll go back to like the whole 3D coordination, right? 3D coordination was like, let's reduce RFIs. And I was like, okay. I mean, yes, they're all metrics. Productivity, how many, sticking points did you have on a project? How many quality incidences, or for construction, how many job site incidents, like things like that. You have to measure. And that Big Brother thing we talked about earlier, like that fear of Big Brother. But let's put a real lens on it. We can measure things. So hook up the body and read all the signals, and then we can make decisions based on all the factors, not just one that we go, oh, I take your temperature. Obviously, you're sick. And I was like, well, maybe not sick. That's one metric. Maybe you just, sat outside for a lot. You're hot.
Maybe you just run hot.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And I think that for us to observe what's happening from a quality and define that will help really make transformation and technology meaningful. Otherwise, it will continue to be this chasing a productivity mark alone. Any one of those unilaterally is going to be, okay, good. I'm glad you made it to that finish line. But now what about the rest of this? Did we look at our quality metrics? Have we moved the needle there? Have we improved the value our staff bring and those teams bring because they have incredible capabilities? Measuring people's capabilities as well and helping them improve. Like that's important. So all of these things, technology can help us in so many ways, but only if we are willing to look at that information and make good decisions, informed decisions from that information. If you aren't willing to look at the data, then you may as well skip it and see how it goes. I feel like that's what we're seeing here is that there's, if you are able to look at that information and make decisions, you should. And I know that's maybe a luxury in some cases, but.
You just dropped the mic right there.
Did I? Great. Did I just drop the mic? Thank you.
Well, Rachel, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. There's so much to take away from this, and I'm going to put a links in the show notes to things we talked about, how people can follow what you're doing on LinkedIn, I assume is the best place. But if there's anywhere else, is there anywhere else that people
No, I think LinkedIn is the place. I think LinkedIn, it'll be the place where I share any updates. But
all right.
Yeah, thank you, Evan. It's been an awesome conversation. And transformation, man, it's a big topic. Lots of things to explore. So.
All right. Until next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
If you watched all the way to the end, thank you. That actually means a lot. I have 2 things I'd ask of you before you go. 1, hit subscribe right now if you haven't already. It's totally free. It takes 1 click, and I'm really trying to get to 1,500 subscribers. We're not there yet, and every single one counts. If this show has been worth your time, that's the easiest thing you can do. Number 2, if you want to go further, if you want to support independent coverage of this industry and get ad-free episodes of the podcast, plus my full Leadership Edge newsletter, head over to trxl.co and click the join button. The link is in the show notes. $12 a month, and you'll be one of the people who actually makes this possible. All right, that's a wrap. Subscribe, share it with someone who would get it, and I'll see you in the next one.